Hey, welcome everybody. Today I am pleased to have Jacqueline Wales on the show. And let me tell you a little bit about her. Jacqueline has devoted the last 17 years of her life to helping women develop greater confidence and belief in their capabilities, take ownership and authority in their roles so they can feel empowered and capable of achieving more than they thought possible. She's the author of The Fearless Factor and The Fearless Factor at Work, and the creator of Transformational Strategies for Success, an online, deeply immersive self-development program supported by coaching. And she can be found at JacquelineWales.com. The phone always rings when I'm doing a podcast. Jacqueline, welcome to the show.
It's nice to be here, Doug. Thank you. Yeah, there's always some kind of, it's either dog barking or the phone ringing or whatever.
Yeah, I got the dog in the house, so she's fine. But people just can't tell on the telephone. I mean, I wish I put a little on-air sign on the phone.
You just reminded me, am I on silent or not?
Yeah.
And the answer was not. So thank you.
So tell us a little bit about your background and the work that you do.
So I'm often asked, why fear? Because, fear fascinates me as an emotion because there's so much involved in what the fear is. And of course, I grew up in a background where fear was very real. And I grew up with a family that was alcoholic, violent, you name it. I got the whole 9 yards thrown at me at a very early age. And so I had to do my own journey to figure out how to really address my own fear and insecurity. And I like to say that everything I teach, everything I write, everything I'm all about is because I've made the journey myself. And I'm not shy about my age. I'm now in my 7th decade. And I think I've got a great deal of wisdom to share about what I've learned over these 7 decades. But the point being is that I came to fear simply because there was so much of it that I had to overcome for my own health and well-being. And not only that, it was about my family. I've got 4 children in my family now, and I wanted them to have a healthy upbringing. So I put enough effort into it that I've changed the entire family dynamics in 1 generation. And that really became the impetus for the work that I started 17 years ago when someone was a coach said to me, you'd be really good in the coaching business. And I was like, really? I've made music, I've written books, I've traveled the world, I've raised my family, but I never had a really conventional life, And she said, well, you've got it all, so you might as well write about it and coach on it. And what I discovered was that I've been giving advice my entire life. And then when she said, well, you can get paid for it, I said, oh, well, that's a nice idea. Let's do that.
So what's your typical clientele?
So my typical clientele tends to be from many different industries, but they're all high achievers. Mm-hmm. I've worked with academics, with scientists, with legal people, with tech people. It makes no difference. What's the key element for all of these women? Self-doubt. Self-doubt, number 1. And then the second part is, how do we help them to raise themselves up to take greater ownership and authority in the roles they inhabit? And a lot of it is believing in your own self. And
how is it that men and women can be brilliant? They can go to school and be extraordinarily well educated and trained and do brilliant work in their chosen careers, and yet still have such deep self-doubt that it paralyzes them deep inside. Well, of course, which they never let anybody see.
Yeah. Well,
how does that happen?
I think it gets embedded at an early age, frankly. And when I talk about this, when I talk about fear and being fearless, I like to say that being fearless is not the absence of fear, but the courage to take the next step. Mm-hmm. But when we look at fear or fear-based thinking and behaviors, a lot of it is tied into I'm not good enough. Talk to a perfectionist. What are they all about? I have to keep proving myself over and over again. Nothing's ever quite good enough. Talk to somebody who's highly competitive. You'll find the same thing. Talk to somebody who needs to be right all the time. It's the same thing. It's all about I'm not good enough. Yeah. And on the flip side of that also is I'm not lovable. I won't be approved of. And so you go out of your way to seek the approval and get validation for your existence. And for women especially, sitting there waiting for somebody to notice them is like the worst thing possible. And I did over 80 interviews for a new book I'm working on right now. And they were all high achieving women. And first question was, where has fear limited your opportunity? And what I got back was, and it was repeated a lot, not speaking up, not making decisions for myself, allowing other people to take control. You know, these are fundamental issues, but behind it all, that self-doubt, that I'm not good enough piece is loud and clear.
I know that I suffered from that for a long time, until I got out of the practice of law. I mean, I was a civil trial lawyer for 22 years before I went back to school and got my master's degree in peacemaking and conflict studies. And I would say that I probably wasn't until my 60s that I got over all of that. It took a long time. It was a lot of work.
Yeah, it is hard work. And that's why, if you look at the percentages of people who are willing to show up and make these changes, these really fundamental life changes, it's a very small percentage. I mean, if you ask somebody the question, who are you? You'll get the labels. You'll get who they think they are based on someone else's identity piece, you know, like you being a lawyer, that's a label, you know.
Yeah.
So we have to be mindful of what are the labels that other people have placed on us, and that we have accepted as the reality of our existence, as opposed to questioning, who are you? Who are you really? And when we talk about authenticity, I'm a little bit leery on that word these days, but there's definitely that piece of finding the uniqueness of you, not what was planted earlier. And that insecurity that you're talking about, that came about from authority figures, from parents, bosses, schools, you name it.
Yeah. And I was one with a lot of disabilities.
Yeah.
And back, I'm your age, I'm 72. Back in those days, born left-handed, partially deaf, almost blind, 2 club feet, couldn't walk until I was 3. And parents who loved me, but didn't know how to support me emotionally, just said, buck it up, kid, make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was tough.
Yeah. And what it does is, I look back on it now and I go, the resilience that was started at a very early age has turned into an extraordinary strength to know that you can overcome almost anything.
This is true.
and you do. And that's another piece that people miss, is that if we are really aware that the experiences we've gone through are strengthening us as human beings. You know, we talk about building character, but beyond the building of character is like, the fear piece is that I won't be able to handle whatever it is that comes my way, when in fact, your past experiences have prepared you for anything.
That's right.
Come up.
I completely agree with that. And it's that, although I had a really miserable first 50 years of my life, well, I won't say it was really miserable. I had a lot of fun along the way, but inside I was pretty much a mess. That overcoming all of that was tough, but worthwhile. And would I change anything? I wouldn't change it if it meant that I had to be different than who I am today.
I'm with you 100% on that. I mean, and I know how long it took me to have the courage to stand up and be fully in my own power, in my own sense of self, and not be in that place of needing other people's validation all the time. God knows I needed a lot of that growing up, and certainly right up into my 50s. When I first started this gig, I'll tell you, I knew nothing about nothing. You know, it was like I knew about life. I'd lived plenty of life, but working with people, helping, advising people on a professional level, there was a lot of learning to do to really get comfortable with that. And now, of course, 17, 18 years later, I'm like, yeah, I know. I know what it's all about. I do it. I'm comfortable doing it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So how do you help your clients start on this journey of becoming fearless and overcoming their own self-doubts?
You got to listen to the stories.
Well, there we go.
You got to listen to the stories. And because I know a lot of these stories, I either lived them or I've had enough work with other people to know these stories. You can certainly pick out what's going on as the undercurrent of what the issues really are about. So if I say to somebody, do you feel like you're not good enough? And they'll go, yeah, well, yeah, kind of. Okay, do you believe that to be true? Well, no, not really. Okay, so where's the gap? let's listen for the gap. Let's find out what are the stories that you tell yourself that have become the means by which you live your life.
Interesting. And how do people do under your tutelage?
Amazingly well, actually.
Oh, that's great.
You know, I created transformational strategies for success out of work that I had created many years ago.
Mhm.
And last year I got together with an instructional designer who's an organizational psychologist. And she took all of that content and questions and everything else that had been part of a analog type program. And we created this online program. And the people who've gone through it in the last year, it's off the charts, Doug. I am just
Wow.
astounded. I mean, people are writing to me going, "You've changed my life." And I'm like, I only asked a few questions.
Yeah, you're pretty excited too.
And it is exciting. There's no question about it. You know, it's
You
like,
know,
whoa,
and
yeah,
it's also very gratifying when you get those emails.
absolutely.
You're like, okay, I'm helping people and that's making my life meaningful too.
Yeah. And that's, you know, I know it's similar for you. I get up every day and I would get up at 3 a.m. and sit on the phone with somebody who needed my input on something. You know, one of the things I like to say is I don't call myself a coach anymore. I'm a guide and a trusted advisor.
Right.
That's really what I do, is you guide people to where they want to go.
Mm-hmm.
And,
I think
help
I
them
think
get the answers.
I think that's really a better metaphor and better description. I mean, that's the work when I'm doing mediations and I'm helping people resolve conflict, or I'm working in difficult conversations. You know, I tell people, look, I'm the Sherpa. I'm not going to carry your backpack for you, but I'll show you how to get to the top of the mountain. And I know where the bears are, and I know where the trails washed out. I know where the danger spots are. But you're going to have to do the heavy lifting.
Yeah, it's a bit like being that Swiss guide, you
That's
know.
right.
And that's a metaphor that I look at. You know, I remember one time being in the Canadian Rockies with a Swiss guide, going on these amazing hiking trails. It was summertime, there wasn't a whole lot of snow, but there's that piece of we're guiding people to go where they want to go.
Right,
Except
exactly.
maybe they don't even know they want to go there. But
Yeah, that's right. And really, it's their. We're not here to tell them where to go.
no.
We're here to have them choose where they think they want to go, guide them, and then if they change their minds along the way, then we just adjust accordingly.
That's right. That's right. How many people come to you and go, I don't know where I want to go. I don't know what I want.
That happens all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time. So let's start with that point and then we'll build from there.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I tell people, well, you pick any point. I mean, not having a goal or a direction to go in is like, it's like being in a sailboat without a compass. You blow in whatever direction the wind blows you.
Yeah.
But if you got a compass, you can set a heading and then set the sail according to the wind, and you can go directly to your goal. And the beauty of it is, once you set a goal, it doesn't mean you're locked into it. You can go to a different compass heading if you want. You can even go almost directly into the wind and still manage to make progress.
Yeah. But you know, the number of people, as we well know, who are absolutely in that sailboat and they have no idea how to read the stars, no compass, no nothing. And they're just floating along.
And what's amazing is how many really successful people are in that category. People that you would think, you know, they're at vice president or executive vice president levels, and maybe bringing down $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year, and they're in that place. It's kind of remarkable.
The other side of that is they don't take the time to do the kind of deep digging around that you and I have done.
Yeah.
Because they'll use, I don't have time, you know, it's not really important, blah, blah, blah. We can get all kinds of excuses for it. But the kind of work that you and I have done and do with our clients, there's not a whole lot of percentages on that in terms of people who are engaging to that level.
Right. I think my experience has been, because I work with emotions a lot, is that people are really afraid of confronting emotions because they've never felt emotionally safe before. And until they can experience emotional safety, it's really hard for them to get their heads around the idea that, hey, we're 98% emotional, only 2% rational. Maybe we should devote some time to developing our emotional competencies.
Yes, yeah, and that's a lot of what, I've worked a lot with middle level managers,
Mhm.
and it's the piece that needs to be addressed over and over again, is that emotional intelligence and helping them to understand their own emotions and
Right.
their own self-awareness, which is key to how they can help the people that they are direct reports, or even those that are above them, how to
Right.
have those conversations.
Right. I mean, you lead in 4 directions, right? You lead up, you lead down, you lead sideways, and you lead inside yourself.
Yeah.
And you've got to be able to do all 4 dimensions. Tell me about the role of empathy in your work.
I think it's critical. It's critical. And because of my own past experiences, there are very few things that will be presented to me that I cannot relate to. And I will find a story to share around that too.
Right.
So I build a lot of empathy with my clients because, no matter what they're going through, I'll go, oh yeah, let me tell you about. And that shared story piece, as you well know,
Mhm.
is a real glue when it comes to building empathy and helping other people build their empathy as well. So I would say it's critical.
Yeah, I teach leadership empathy, because I think it's one of the foundational skills of leadership. I think what happens is that people rise through the ranks of their organizations through technical skills, and then they get to the top, and they all of a sudden realize that it's no longer technical. I'm not making things anymore. I'm not doing things. I'm not coding. I'm not selling stuff. I'm leading other people. And that means I need to relate to them at a very deep level and have them trust me. And, and that requires empathy, leadership empathy, which I
But
think it's maligned a lot. I mean, people see empathy as being something very weak, when in fact it's really foundational.
I think it's changing. I think they're beginning to get it at this point. When you look at their levels of exhaustion and
Right.
disconnection at work and disengagement at work, and the number of people who are not people focused. But here's my point I like to make, and which is why my transformational program is all about, or what it's about. Self-awareness, number one, for that leader. I have to get you tuned into who you are, number one, and learn self-compassion,
Right.
because out of self-compassion comes empathy also. So I have to get you to the point where, this perfectionist nature in you, because you're all high achievers, so you'll all overdo it. I know it, I do it. But the point being is that if I can get you to understand self-compassion as a piece of self-awareness, then you're more likely to have compassion for someone else, which again speaks to the empathy piece.
How do you get people to move into a place of self-compassion, especially when they've been brought up under the Protestant ethic where I've got to work harder than everybody else, or I'm a slacker?
It's very hard. There's no question about it. I worked with one client for 2 years to help him understand that he didn't have to take a two by four to the side of his head every time he stepped out of line according to his rules.
Right.
And that if he didn't do something perfectly, there was a way to speak softly about, tomorrow you can do better. And so it was a process of just continuing to reinforce that message over time. You can't wave a magic wand on this stuff. If you've spent a lifetime beating yourself up because you've got this internal dialogue about how wrong you are, how stupid you are, how blah, 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 that nobody else gets to hear, as you well know.
Right.
But, that self-judgment piece needs to be countered with the compassion piece. And, I'm not a Buddhist, but I definitely believe in Buddhist philosophy. And, all life is suffering. How do we mitigate that? And a lot of it is just through that self-compassion, which in turn is compassion for others. I mean, how many times do you watch something on the news that's heartbreaking and it brings tears to your eyes?
Right.
That's empathy.
That's right. So I teach a unique set of skills. I teach people how to listen to emotions rather than to words. In fact, I say ignore the words and pay attention only to the emotions when you need to practice empathy. And the experience that I've seen over the last 20 years is that when people learn how to do this, they automatically develop compassion. because what they see in other people, they see people now as emotional, not irrational. They see them as having an emotional experience. They know exactly what to say, how to say it, when to say it. They know how to calm down angry people. They no longer have fights and arguments in their lives. And over a course of 6 to 8 weeks of practicing and really dialing this in, they all of a sudden start seeing emotional people as people they can be concerned with. And that's the compassion part. And then what happens? This is the magic. They turn it on themselves. And they start recognizing their own emotions. They start labeling their own emotions, and they automatically start feeling compassionate towards themselves. Oh, I'm just having an emotional moment now. This isn't defining who I am. Yeah, I'm pissed off. I'm angry. I'm frustrated. I'm whatever. But okay, so I am. So what? I'm okay.
So it's the old thing of don't take yourself too seriously,
Or acknowledge. I think that what I've learned is acknowledge your emotions.
Yes.
And deeply acknowledge your emotions. Don't run from them. Don't hide from them. Don't repress them. Don't suppress them. Don't deny them. Acknowledge, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, or I'm in deep grief right now. And just accept that's just what you're experiencing. And it will pass. It will pass.
So here's a question for you. How do you deal with something like shame and vulnerability? Because vulnerability is a big piece of that, acknowledging one's emotions.
It takes time.
Very hard.
Yeah, the way I do that is with all my students, my clients, is I say you're going to start in a really low risk social situation where there is no risk of embarrassment or failure. My favorite laboratory is Starbucks, right? So I instruct my clients, I say something like this. Okay, so you're going to go into Starbucks or your coffee place of choice, your cafe of choice. And you're going to go up and you order your coffee and hand the credit card and give them your order. And then you're going to look at them and say, hey, man, assuming it's a man, hey, you're really happy today. You look really excited. And that's all you're going to say. And then put your lab coat on, step back, and watch what happens. And just make a mental note. What did I just observe? And you're going to do this 10 times in the next week and a half, once a day. You're going to do it at Starbucks. You're going to do it at the checkout at the grocery store. You're going to do it when you go out to eat to a restaurant server. And you're just going to give them one emotion. You're going to reflect back one emotion that you think they're experiencing. And after you've done this 10 times, you start to see, you're going to see the same reactions every single time. And you'll start to see the predictability of this. And that will start to build the confidence. And you will not feel as vulnerable and as naked and as out there because you're telling somebody what they're feeling. And your confidence will build. And within 3 or 4 weeks, it'll become habitual, 3 to 5 weeks. And that's how it works. And then after they got that down, then I say, okay. And I got the sense that I can throw stuff at them and they can reflect back feelings and they're doing a pretty good job. I say, okay, now start doing it with your friends. And they start doing it with friends for a week or two. Then I said, all right, now let's start doing it with your colleagues at work. And how does that go? And they get that figured out, dialed in. Then I teach them how to affect label a group or listen to the emotions of a group. And they say, all right, you're ready to bring it home now. And here's what you're going to do when you bring it home. Again, very gently and gracefully. And so you just slowly, the thing about vulnerability is, to your point, it's very scary. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of fear involved. So start out, keep it safe. And start up with really small projects where they can dip their little toe in the shallow end of the kiddie's pool without any risk of doing any damage to themselves. Where I think we get into trouble teaching and training this stuff is we ask people to do too much too fast. And I think we've got to be more incremental about it.
I love what you're saying, and I definitely could take a few lessons from you.
Happy to help you out.
I love that, because it is about the revealing of that internal life that we're talking about.
And we're also overcoming all of this old childhood programming. We're taught, we're taught all this crap as kids, which is okay for socializing. Because you got to socialize a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old. But by the time you're 6 or 7, those rules don't matter anymore. And by the time you're 12, those rules are totally irrelevant. And yet we're never deprogrammed out of what we learned as children. And we carry that forward as if this is the rule for life. And it's not. It's far more sophisticated and nuanced than what we teach a 2-year-old or 3-year-old.
Yeah.
I just wish, I wish to God somebody had taken me at 12 years old and sat down and said, okay, you're 12 years old, you're going into puberty. This is what you're going to face. It's going to be really messy for the next 6 or 7 years. And by the way, all those rules we taught you as children, you still want to remember them, but there's a little bit more you need to know.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I mean, you know, thinking about feelings and the safety of feelings, I was around about 26 or 27, and I was talking with somebody who was a psychologist at the time, and it was a casual conversation, but he probed and he got some responses, and then he said to me, "What are you feeling?" And I felt like a steel door came down, and I was like, "I don't feel anything." And he said, no, you're feeling something." I was
That's
like,
right.
I ain't gonna talk about it. Yeah.
Well, so to that point, my wife and I have a practice. Every morning we get up at sunrise and we go out and sit in our hot tub and watch the sun come up over the mountains. And the first question he asks me is, "What are you feeling right now?" And then I turn around and say, "And what are you feeling?" And we actually have to sort of plumb, because, you know, in the morning we're waking up and typically don't feel much, but it's there. Well, I feel a little excited today. I'm a little tired. I feel really rested, and I'm excited, and I'm kind of anxious, but, and teaches us to really pay attention to the nuances of our emotional experience in the moment.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, I have to say, even for myself right now, I'm still going through changes, and it has to do with recognizing where the emotions are getting clogged in the system, because
That's
we
right.
hold our emotions at a cellular level. We try to deal with it with our conscious mind, but the fact of the matter is, as you pointed out, it's the unconscious that's doing the work most of the time.
That's
Which
right.
way below, we're like the iceberg, you know.
That's right. And that's why the reprogramming is so important.
Right, exactly. But no matter how old you get, you're still dealing with, you know,
Oh,
stuff.
stop growing, start dying.
Exactly.
Right?
And I say, well, you know, you're not done until you're in the pine box going out the door.
That's exactly right. And even then, you're just moving to a higher plane and
That's
doing the
it.
work
It's
in
just
another
another
place.
kind of change. What can I say?
Exactly. Well, I got one more question for you. This is the question I always like to ask my guests. If what's the one thing that we wouldn't know about you personally, Jacqueline, unless you revealed it to us?
Not written, not spoken about previously, something.
It's just something that most people would never know about it unless you revealed it to them.
I'm a professionally trained singer.
Well, there you go. Really?
Yes.
And did you perform?
I was a cantor for synagogues in Paris and Amsterdam for
Oh
5
my
years.
God. Wow.
Most people don't know that.
That's the kind of answer I want. Well, I happen to be a jazz and blues violinist.
I love it.
All right, we've come to the end of the half hour. I think that's we bounced this around enough. Thank you so much, Jacqueline Wales. Check her work out, everybody, at JacquelineWales.com. Yeah, I got that right. Jacqueline Wales. JacquelineWales.com. There we go. Thank you, everybody.
So
We'll see you
much,
next time.
Thank you.